Hello friends, this is Growl. In this video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know on how to play Holy Priest in 9.1 Mythic Plus. This video is going to be basic, mostly just going to cover my choices and why I do what I do, but I also want to include stuff that I've learned playing Priest over Shadowlands Season 1, so hopefully it'll be helpful if you're just picking up the spec for the first time, or if you're a returning player just trying to figure out what's going on with the patch. Holy Priest has actually been rising in popularity for high keys since the beginning of the expansion. It's a really straightforward and traditional healer, but it still has enough good utility and damage to make it viable in higher level keys. I think it's actually surprised a lot of people with how good it can be. Like previous people who have only played Disc Priest kind of gave it a try and ended up actually liking it a lot. And I think that it's completely viable if you wanted to be a Holy Priest Mythic Plus main, whereas previously it felt like Disc was the only way to go. I also make tons of other stuff. I do video reviews on this channel and stream high keys for every healer, so don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and go follow my Twitch. Links for that stuff as well as all the weak auras you see and my UI stuff will be in the description of the video. So let's get started. There's not really that much that's changed with Holy Priest, to be honest. If you understood Holy Priest in 9.0, you'll understand it in 9.1. There are very, very few changes. The one change that I think is worth talking about is Symbol of Hope. This was changed so that it also recovers 60 seconds of a defensive ability from each of your allies when this is used. This is actually kind of handy. It doesn't have a whole lot of uses in Mythic Plus, especially for DPS players. Like, look, you're lucky if your DPS player presses their defensive one time, let alone expecting them to press it twice. However, one thing I found it's nice for is using it for the tank. Let's say the tank is running out of juice, they don't have any buttons left, and they're starting to kite or whatever. You can actually just pop your Symbol of Hope and it'll recharge your tank's Fiery Brand or IBF or something like that, and they'll immediately have another button that they can press if they need to stay in. As for race, I prefer Goblin for Horde and Night Elf for Alliance. Those abilities just have some use in Mythic Plus, and ultimately race doesn't really matter a whole lot, so if you want to play something else, I wouldn't really worry about it too much. As for stats, stats are a little bit complicated on Holy Priest. Ideally, you'd like to have some level of haste so that your casts feel like they don't take too long. That amount can be preferenced depending on, who you are and your playstyle. I would say a good number to aim for is around 20 to 25% or so, and sort of feel it out from there. I think going over 25% would be fine, and playing under 20% is fine too. However, that's kind of an area that I think is good. Then, after that, you're just dumping most of your points into crit and verse as you see fit. Crit is going to be a little more effective in terms of how much healing you're doing and how much damage you're doing, very slightly. However, Mastery gives you that slight damage reduction buff as well. And verse can be really important because as a priest, you're slow, you're squishy. Having that extra DR all the time is very helpful. So personally, I like haste verse in Mythic Plus, but any stats really work. Mastery is a great healing stat, however, that's all it does is just sort of give you healing. It's a little bit one-dimensional, so don't stress out if you have a lot of Mastery or certain items with Mastery, because it's good for healing, it's just not that versatile. For Raid, you do like a lot of Mastery though. It's great if you're going to be playing in Sanctum of Domination, any of the difficulties as well. So for instance, my Legendary, I actually crafted it with Mastery on it just because if I ever want to use this in Raid, I'll probably want Mastery and not Haste. So don't, if you're worried about playing your Priest in multiple plays, you can stat however you want. Mythic Plus is actually very, very flexible in this class. As for Trinkets, your go-to is probably going to be Changeling. This is from Mists of Tyrannus Scythe. It's just a nice stat stick. Other than that, your second best one is probably just another stat stick from Eye of the Jailer, the Ocular Gland. This just gives you stats while above 50%. This is a pretty solid trinket as well. If you can't get your hand on this, I would basically just try whatever you can. I would experiment with different trinkets. I don't think any of them are really too impactful on your gameplay. Any of the raid trinkets might be good, however, from early testing in Sims, they didn't look too great. So if you do happen to get your hands on something that, for sure give it a try, especially if it's high item level. I just don't know if it's going to be optimal. As for another dungeon trinket, I might look for the Ruby in Theater of Pain. This gives you a ton of crit that you can use for 2 minutes. You can pair this up with your Apoth for even more healing, or you can just kind of use it on its own for whatever. The PvP trinkets are okay too. They're probably not best in slot, but if you happen to be a PvPer and you have these at high item level, these are just fine to use in Mythic Plus as well. Either the 1 minute on use or the haste primary stat one, this insignia. As for enchants, pretty run-of-the-mill, normal stuff. You want stamina and avoidance on your cape. For your chest, you actually want 30 stats. I have the mana from Disc Priest raiding on my chest, but ideally you want plus 30 stats. Your bracer, you want plus 15 intellect. Your weapon, you want celestial guidance. For your rings, as I mentioned earlier, if you need a little bit of haste, if your cast feels slow, you can gem and enchant haste. Otherwise, you can just get crit and verse. You'll notice my enchants and stuff are all over the place. I do a lot of different stuff on this priest, and I haven't had it optimized for Mythic Plus Holy Priest or anything, so don't look to copy anything that you see on my character. This is mainly just for me to explain to you guys. As for consumables, you have your Flask of Power that gives you int. You have your Heavy Desolate Armor Kit that gives you stamina, Shadow Core Oil for a little bit of extra damage. Any sort of food buff is fine. Ideally, you want the Feast, the Intellect one, but, you know, Haste or Verse or anything like that is fine. And if you really want to try hard, you got the Augment Runes, but these can be a bit expensive. For Legendary, you actually want to make this on your neck, not your wrists, because this is a Domination slot for Cloth now. This is just an old Legendary. I'm going to recraft this on my neck eventually too. Flash Concentration is your go-to. It's just very, very strong. I don't think there are really any other options for Mythic Plus. Flash Concentration, I would highly recommend getting a weak aura that tracks your stacks and your duration of this and have it displayed very prominently on your screen somewhere so you can keep track of it. The goal during a dungeon is to maintain 5 stacks of it at all times. This is going to juice your heal and make it not only cast faster, but heal for more. And heal is going to be your bread and butter. You know, press this button a lot to do big healing button. So you're just going to constantly want to maintain 5 stacks of Flash Concentration and use heal as your main heal. You can experiment with other Legos too. Maybe there's some fun class specific or Covenant specific Legos, but I wouldn't worry about them too much. And as a first craft, you definitely want to go for Flash Concentration. As for Covenants, none of the Covenants are super appealing to Holy. So if you're playing another spec, or let's say you're PvPing and you want to be Venthyr, it doesn't really matter a whole lot for dungeons. If you're really trying to min-max though, I think the optimal Covenant is going to be Night Fae. You'll see my guy is Kyrian because I also like to play Discipline Priest a lot, and I think Kyrian's great for Discipline. Kyrian isn't great for Holy, but, you know, it gets the job done and it's fine. Let's talk about Soulbind stuff here. Because I'm not Night Fae, I'm going to just pull up a calculator thingy here. So I would probably recommend Naya for Holy, although any of the trees are just fine. I just took this row all the way down here with 3 potencies. Your best potency is going to be Resonant Words. This gives you a buff to your heal every time you use a Holy Word spell. And you're using Holy Word spells generally like once every 20 seconds. So this is going to give you a lot of really good value out of your heals, especially during Apoth. For Finesse, the Finesse that I like the most is the Power Infusion cooldown reduction. PI is one of the most valuable assets you can bring, and it's what's going to make friends and get you invited to groups. So having a reduced cooldown on this is going to be useful. If you're trying to line it up with another ability all the time, you know, you might not get value out of this, but just for general pug purposes, I would like this conduit. For Endurance, the best conduit I think is Translucent Image. This gives you a little bit of DR on your fade. Because Priest can be so squishy and you don't have lots of strong DR for yourself, having this is at least able to reduce some of the damage you take. Get in the habit of pressing Fade anytime you know you're about to take damage. Fade's a really short cooldown, it doesn't cost you anything, and it gives you that, you know, 10% or so DR. Now to fill out our other potencies, the next potency I like is Lasting Spirit. This buffs your Guardian Spirit, which is one of your best abilities as a Holy Priest. Again, this is another ability where if you can use it well, you can really differentiate yourself from other healers. As for your third potency, I'm not totally sure. I think if you're really good at micromanaging your Fae Guardians and you're min-maxing the buffs, I think the Night Fae Soulbind Fae Fermata is going to be your best one. You can essentially give a second smaller buff to another player, which is going to be very helpful. However, if you feel like you're not using the Night Fae ability well, or you just want something a bit easier, you also can use Holy Oration. This just reduces your Holy Words a bit more. This is also a nice conduit to have as well. And for the Endurance, I just have this new Animosphere, but ultimately, whichever one you decide to take, another Finesse or Endurance or anything like that, none of them are really that impactful. I think for Night Fae, any of these other trees are good. Dreamweaver is nice because of the cheat death. Cheat death is actually really, really good in Mythic Plus pugging, and it can save your team from tons of wipes, you know, when you end up with teams that either don't have a battle res or just don't have someone with a battle res and a brain. For DPS, Corian is going to be your best option. However, Holy Priest isn't traditionally like a DPS sort of healer, so this is probably not one that you'll be thinking about unless you're really trying to min-max. As for talents, there's like one main talent build that I usually go for. For the first row, Trail of Light, because you're using so much heal, you get a lot of value from Trail of Light. Feather is really the only go-to one here. It's just a little nice movement speed buff. Don't forget to use this on your teammates if they're behind, or your tank if they're trying to set up a pull. Again, Feather's kind of a cool thing that you can use very often in a dungeon. Guardian Angel reduces the cooldown of your GS by a lot, by 2 full minutes if it doesn't proc. Because a lot of times you're going to use this and it's not going to proc, you really, really want this CDR. It turns into an ability that you can use basically every single trash pack, or even multiple times per bosses for one single boss. And then if it procs, well, you know, great, you just saved the life anyway. In this row, I think Censure and Shining Force are both okay, depending on the situation and what you feel like you want. As a default, I think Censure is a little bit easier. It just gives you a stun on your Chastise and gives you a little bit more control. But for a week like Sanguine, or if you feel like you just want to help move mobs around to keep them grouped up, Shining Force is also very useful. You just have to be a bit more careful with this. I think as a beginner, I might lean towards Censure, but Shining Force is great too. On this row, I run Surge of Light. Surge of Light is nice because it gives you instant cast, no mana, Flash of Lights, and because we're playing Flash Concentration and we're maintaining it all the time, we're going to be wanting to cast Flash, so I said Flash of Light, too much Holy Paladin, Flash Heal. We're going to be wanting to cast Flash Heal frequently, and when you have those procs, it makes it very, very nice because you know that you'll be able to renew your Flash Concentration whenever, so you'll just hold on to that proc of your Surge of Light, you'll see it there, and then you'll know as soon as your Flash Concentration's about to go, you can just pop it, free heal, doesn't cost you anything, you don't need to hard cast. In this row, I think Benediction is probably the go-to. None of these talents are super powerful. I think Divine Star and Halo could be used as DPS options, but they can be hard to get very much healing out of them, especially Divine Star in a meta where you're very often playing with a lot of range specs. It's pretty hard to get a lot of healing out of Divine Star. And in the last row, I think Apoth is a must-take. This is your go-to sort of really high throughput cooldown you're going to want to use anytime there's going to be a lot of damage. We'll go over a little bit how to use Apoth later in the rotation section. But first, I want to go over the basics. So as you've been seeing here, the number one thing you need to do as a Holy Priest is maintain your Flash Concentration. I'm even doing it during the tutorial. That's how ingrained into my brain it is. I'm watching this when I'm on this character, and if it's about to drop, I'm going to press Flash Heal and renew it. You always want to maintain your Flash Concentration, even walking between packs. You know, maybe if you need to save a life or dispel a harmful debuff that's going to kill somebody, but otherwise, always maintain this Flash Concentration. Then while it's up, your main heal is just literally heal. You're just going to press heal a lot. It does a ton of healing. It's very mana efficient. Even for group healing, you know, you're going to have that Trail of Light. You're going to have that mastery bonus, and you're going to be doing a lot of healing, even just one person at a time. When you're not pressing heal, let's say there's not an emergency, 2 slightly more efficient buttons you want to press are Prayer of Mending and Circle of Healing. These are, again, slightly more efficient than heal. However, they're not emergency heals. They're sort of like little drizzles of healing that help you with your AoE healing. So if anyone's ever in danger, you don't want to be pressing them. You just want to be juicing up the person in danger with heal. But once things get settled and you just kind of want to lay the groundwork and just boost everyone's health up slowly, that's when you're pressing that Prayer of Mending and Circle of Healing. Renew is something you can use pretty rarely. It's your only sort of hot or like way that you can prepare damage. However, it's not nearly as mana efficient or quick as heal. So you want to use Renew very, very sparingly. The only time you're really using Renew is if you're either moving and you can't press anything else, or if you're, let's say there's a big burst of damage coming up in 5 seconds, you could maybe throw out a couple Renews on the party, maybe some of the more vulnerable members, if everyone else is at full health. But otherwise, Renew, not a button that you press too often. Then you have Serenity and Sanctify. Serenity is your big single target heal. Sanctify is your big AoE heal. No, my flash concentration stacks dropped. Serenity is something that you're going to press very, very often. This is because your heal is going to recharge your Serenity slowly. So don't be afraid to use Serenity very, very often. Even though heal is mana efficient, if all you're doing is just spamming heal and flash heal on cooldown, you will run out of mana eventually. And a key to keeping up high HPS while not breaking the bank on mana is continuously using your Sanctify and your Serenity. Remember, it's not just the healing that you get from those, right? You also get the healing from your Conduit, your Resonant Words. So you're not only doing good healing with those abilities, but you're also juicing your next heals. Serenity especially is a very, very powerful ability. Don't be afraid to sort of hold on to this as an emergency. It does 14,000 healing in my current gear. It'll do even more, and it's an instant cast with not too much mana. It's an insanely powerful spell that you just want to be pressing over and over and over again. Don't worry about saving this for an emergency. Other than that, we're not really pressing Prayer of Healing that much. Prayer of Healing is not very good. You're also not pressing Power Word Shield. Just because heal is so powerful with flash concentration, it sort of makes those other two abilities obsolete. As for DPS, the Holy Priest DPS rotation is very, very straightforward. Your go-to button is Holy Fire. Holy Fire is your most efficient button you can press. It does good initial damage. It adds a dot to the target as well. If Holy Fire is on cooldown, you can add in Shadow Word Pain. You can also press Chastise. It does a decent amount of burst damage. And then if you have nothing else, you can just press Smite. But remember, Holy Fire is a very, very short cooldown. So ideally, you're trying to press your Holy Fire every time it's up. And then your other stuff is just sort of gravy. I know Holy Priest kind of has the connotation of like, look, I just want to be a healer. I don't want a DPS. Remember that Mythic Plus is timed, and just sneaking in Holy Fire here or there on priority targets, helping burst boss down, burst a dangerous caster mob down, it adds up over time. You know, just try really hard to just keep throwing in those Holy Fires over and over and over again. You know, there's a big difference between a Holy Priest doing 1k DPS and a Holy Priest doing 0 DPS. You know, it actually saves a lot more time than you would think. As for cooldowns, Holy Priest actually has a lot of pretty interesting cooldowns. The first one I'm going to talk about is Apotheosis. Apoth is on a 2-minute cooldown, and it not only resets all of your holy words immediately, but it also improves the cooldown reduction by a lot. So you'll see here that I'll use my Serenity, and then I'll press heal, and it's only taking 6 seconds off of this heal. However, I can press Apoth, it immediately gives me my Serenity back, and now when I press heal or flash heal, it's taking almost half the cooldown off. And every 3 heals that I press, I can immediately just press another Serenity. And remember, in combination with that holy, with the, what was it called? I don't even remember the name of the conduits, man. I just know what they do. Resonant Words. With the Resonant Words conduit, you're actually healing a ton in Apotheosis when you're weaving in your Serenities and your big heals. Generally, my rule with Apoth is I try and use my Serenity and my Sanctify on cooldown as much as possible, just to maintain healing. Then if I'm ever in a situation where my group is taking so much burst damage that I need to use Serenity and Sanctify, but they're already on cooldown, that's when I'll pop Apoth to recharge them, because that's kind of a good rule of thumb for, okay, well, if you've already used your big heals and people are still in danger, you should probably pop that Apoth and do more healing. That being said, it's a really short cooldown. It's only a 2-minute cooldown, so don't be afraid to just pop it anytime you think there's going to be a tough boss phase or a lot of damage incoming. One small thing, too, is it actually works with... Don't forget that all this stuff works with Chastise as well. So you can actually use Chastise to get your Resonant Words buff to do a bigger heal. Also, you can just pop Apoth for DPS and recharge your Chastise a little bit faster. That's like very min-maxy and barely adds any more damage, so I wouldn't really worry about it too much. Then you have Divine Hymn. Divine Hymn's a 3-minute cooldown. It channels healing into everyone in the group, and then it also gives a... not a hot, but it gives a buff to them that increases the healing that they get by 20% if it's full channeled. You can see here it stacks up slowly over time. This is good to use for medium amounts of consistent group damage. So if people are in high danger, this is not a button you want to press. It's mainly for, okay, everyone on your team is kind of drizzling down slowly and you need to get some more juice, and they're going to continue taking damage over the next 15 or 20 seconds. You can full channel that him, give a buff to everyone on your party. Again, him only a 3-minute cooldown, so don't be too afraid to just throw this out. You know, let's say everyone's only at 80% health, but you think they're about to take more damage soon. You can kind of press that him early, get everyone topped, and then get that buff on him in case you need to do more healing later. Next we have Guardian Spirit. Guardian Spirit is very, very powerful. It's one of your best tools as a Holy Priest. It can be hard to use if you're still sort of a beginner, if you're not good at watching out and knowing what every single mob does. But the more knowledge you get of the dungeons and your class, the more you'll know when to use this spell. Guardian Spirit you can use for 3 different purposes. Number 1, you can use it on the tank. You can use it either if you think they're about to die or just to help them with their self-healing. Let's say everyone in your party is taking damage and you can't really give the tank the attention that they deserve. You can throw that GS on the tank and their self-healing will be improved. They'll get bonus healing, and if they happen to die, they will, you know, they'll not take that damage and they'll get healed up. So in a very crisis situation, you can throw the GS on the tank, and then you can start spot healing your party members and try and get them topped up while, you know, the tank should be self-sustainable with that GS. You can also use it for one-shots. For example, let's say someone you know is either going to be in very high danger or you think they're about to die. This one's a little bit harder. It takes some foresight, but you can just pop the GS on them. Immediately it stops that ability and they get saved. It's a really, really cool feeling as a Holy Priest to just, like, you see someone on your team is going to die, you know they're going to die, and no amount of healing is going to save them except for GS, and you pop that GS on them, they survive the one shot or whatever thing they're going to stand into. And if that ever happens to somebody, they're going to be like, holy crap, this priest is sick. Another option in the crisis situation that I managed is you can also GS yourself. Let's say it's heavy group damage, but the tank isn't in danger. You can GS yourself, and then that way it just sort of relieves some stress off the party healing. If you know the tank isn't in danger and you know you have GS, you can just fully concentrate on your 3 DPS players. You don't even have to worry about standing in bad stuff. Let's say you're just spamming healing and you know something's about to hit you, but you feel like you can't move because you're just pumping out heals. You can literally just GS yourself, and then you get hit by the thing, and then you live. Remember that you can only get over, you know, GS isn't going to always save you. Only if you get overkilled by a certain amount. So, you know, GS isn't an automatic, you know, person can never die with GS. You can absolutely die with this on you. And last, I want to talk about utility. When I was kind of going through all the Priest toolkit, I realized that Priest actually has a ton of utility. You don't really think about it so much when you think of Priest, but its utility is actually crazy good. The first one is important that you're stopping mobs. You have both Psychic Scream as well as Chastise. Scream is going to be your AoE stop. Chastise is going to be your single target stop. One thing I noticed from beginner priest players is that they're scared to use their Psychic Scream. They probably had some experience early on where they feared a mob and the mob ran into another pack and, oh no, why are you using your fear or whatever. But realistically, in an organized or even an unorganized dungeon group, if mobs, you know, if you're in combat with mobs, they're going to get broken on their fear instantly. The only time you have to be careful about your fear is if you're in the middle of nowhere with a mob. Let's say, for instance, you happen to pull Healing Thread on a mob. Your whole team is standing over there. You want to be careful about fearing this guy because he's going to run and pull some other pack, right? But let's say, for example, your whole team is on top of this, you know, there's one mob and he's about to do a dangerous cast. You can just use that fear on him to interrupt the cast because your whole team is there. There's a lot of opportunities to use Psychic Scream. The best is as an AoE stop when you're fighting a pack with a bunch of casters, and you can just press that Psychic Scream, interrupt, you know, 4 different spell casts at once. It can be very, very valuable. You can also use it to stop spell casts of stuff that you couldn't otherwise interrupt, or if your team is monkeys and they just don't like to interrupt stuff. The next really important utility you have is Power Infusion. I haven't talked about PI yet, but it's one of the things that I think will separate a good priest from an average priest. PI generally should be used on your DPS and during their big cooldowns. If you're just starting off, if you're not super experienced with Priest, honestly, just send it out. Look at the meters, see whoever your highest DPS guy is, and just give him PI over and over again. Once you get more experience, when you start to learn what the classes do and what sorts of classes want haste when, you can be more precise when you use those. I would highly recommend using either some sort of add-on or weak auras that tracks your party's cooldowns, so you know, okay, my paladin just used wings, I'm going to give him PI, or, oh, my mage has combust up soon, I don't want to waste it because I want to give him the PI during combust. And again, that will separate you from other priests, and that's how you get invited to groups. If you ever feel like, oh, no one ever wants a holy priest or whatever, people only want holy paladin, it's like, well, if you're that priest that's using their utility, you're using psychic screen to stop mobs, you're using your PI and your DPS to do big damage. Like, look, DPS, you can pretend like your teammates want you to do big damage, but realistically they want to do big damage. So if you're giving your teammates PI, that's what they want, that's how you get invited. Another one is Mind Soothe. Mind Soothe can only be used on humanoids, and luckily I placed myself in the middle of Ardenweald, so I don't see any humanoids I can use. But remember that you can use Mind Soothe to run by mobs. It reduces their detection radius by quite a bit. Mind Soothe in combination with your own fade is actually crazy. It makes you almost invisible, and you can walk like right in the front of mobs without detecting them. Another good use of Mind Soothe is just to stop your team from butt pulling random stuff. Everyone who's been a pug healer knows that situation where you see your teammate over there, they're standing right next to a pack, they're gonna pull it, and then of course they pull it, right, and then you wipe. But you can actually Mind Soothe the mobs that they're next to, and that reduces the detection radius of those mobs, so that, well, let's be honest, it's probably some dumb hunter and they're just gonna pull the pack anyway, but at least you tried. You also have Mass Dispel, which is an AoE dispel. Remember, this only dispels magic effects. It doesn't remove poisons or curses or anything like that, but it is useful on a few specific fights, as well as Dispel Magic, which you can use on enemies to remove buffs as well. Lots of buffs that are useful to remove in dungeons. Again, I'd recommend nameplate add-ons or some level of knowledge to understand which debuffs you need to remove. Life Grip, I can't really demonstrate Life Grip again because I'm in the middle of Ardenweald, but Life Grip is an awesome ability. Leap of Faith, I think it's called, actually. Everyone calls it Life Grip, though. And it's something that can definitely save teammates. Another one that it takes a lot of foresight, it takes a lot of experience from your perspective to see the danger coming and to grip them ahead of time. If you're playing with really good teammates in Discord, they may call for it, to know when they need to use it. Otherwise, I wouldn't stress out too much. It's something that's going to come with time. You'll learn situations like, for instance, the platforms in Theater of Pain, where people like to get knocked off by tornadoes. If you have that watchful eye, you can sort of see that your teammate is about to get hit by the tornado and grip him back in time. And lastly is Shining Force. If you decide to take that talent, it's a really nice ability. You can knock mobs away from you. You can use it to either A, protect someone if there's a bunch of mobs near them and you want to knock them away. B, you can use it to interrupt a cast. If a mob is getting a dangerous cast off that's going to kill you or someone else, you can just press that Shining Force to knock them away. Another thing you can do is you can actually use it to group mobs. Very often you'll have a situation where there's some sort of dangerous caster or archer or something that's standing not in the pack because they don't like to move. You can actually just walk right up next to the archer or the mob or whatever, use that Shining Force and kind of angle it because it's always going to get knocked from you. So like, let's say you're trying to knock it by this mob, you kind of stand right here, use Shining Force on yourself and just knock the mob over there. This can be very, very helpful for time and also safety to get those dangerous casters and ranged mobs out of the way. Well, that mostly covers my guide to Holy Priest in 9.1. I hope this info was helpful to you. There was definitely a lot of layered information, some stuff that's more simple, some stuff that's more advanced. Some of the stuff in this guide you might not fully understand or appreciate or know how to use until you get more experience in dungeons, and that's just fine. That's what's fun about the game. So I hope this is helpful again. If you have any questions or other stuff that you think I forgot, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'd appreciate if you gave the video a like and again, subscribe to my channel. Happy keying, friends.